My grandmother Eleanor has lived in the same house for 53 years. A white colonial on Sycamore Drive, 4 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, a garden she tended herself until 3 years ago when her hands started shaking too much to hold the trowel properly. She raised 4 children in that house, buried a husband in that house, not literally, but the kind of buried that happens when you sit in the same living room for 40 years and then one day you sit there alone. She was, for most of my life, the sharpest person in any room she entered. Past tense. Because 3 years ago, Eleanor started forgetting. Not everything at once. Not the way you see in movies, not one morning waking up blank. It was slower than that, crueler than that. Words that used to come easily started arriving late. Faces she'd known for decades would surface and then slip. She would call me by my mother's name, then catch herself, then laugh in a way that told you she knew something was wrong and had decided to be gracious about it. She was diagnosed with moderate dementia 18 months ago. And 6 weeks after her diagnosis, my cousin Derek moved in to help. My name is Olivia. I'm 28 years old. I'm a paralegal at a family law firm in Columbus, Ohio. I have been working in legal offices since I was 22, which means I have spent 6 years watching what happens to families when money and grief and proximity collide without oversight. I have seen it many times. I recognized it immediately when I saw it happening to my own. Derek is 31. He is my Aunt Patricia's son, my grandmother's grandson on her youngest daughter's side. He and I were never particularly close growing up. He was the cousin who showed up at Christmas with elaborate stories about business ventures that never quite materialized, who borrowed money from relatives with every intention of paying it back that somehow never quite happened, who had the particular talent of making you feel vaguely guilty for noticing these things. When he announced he was moving into Grandma Eleanor's house to care for her full-time, the family was relieved. I was the only one who wasn't. Derek arrived with 2 suitcases and a plan he'd had for months. I didn't know about the plan yet. None of us did. What I saw in those first weeks was surface-level Derek cooking meals, driving Eleanor to appointments, sitting with her in the evenings while she watched her shows. He posted photos on Facebook. Spending quality time with Grandma with a picture of them at the kitchen table. Family members commented heart emojis. I watched and said nothing. But I visited. I made a point of visiting regularly every 2 weeks, sometimes more. I brought Eleanor her favorite lemon cookies from the bakery on 5th. I sat with her in the garden even when it was cold. I held her hand and let her call me Susan, my mother's name, when the fog came in. And I didn't correct her because it didn't matter and she was happy. And I noticed things. Small things first. The collection of Hummel figurines that had sat on Eleanor's mantelpiece for 30 years gone one visit, replaced by a candle. The silver serving set her mother had brought from Virginia, not in the dining room cabinet where it had lived my entire life. A new flat-screen TV in Derek's bedroom that had not been there the visit before. Small things. But I was a paralegal. I knew what small things added up to. I asked Derek about the figurines casually. He said Eleanor had wanted to declutter, that she'd asked him to donate some things. I asked Eleanor about the figurines directly, on a good day, when she was clear. She looked at me with her sharp old eyes and said, "What? Figurines?" I said, "The ones on the mantelpiece, Grandma. The little ceramic ones. You've had them since before Mom was born." She looked at the empty mantelpiece. She said, "Those were your grandfather's mother's." I said, "I know." She said, "Why would I get rid of those?" I looked at her. She looked back at me. And in that moment, clear-eyed, present, briefly, completely herself, she said something I wrote down in my car before I drove away. She said, "Olivia, something doesn't feel right in this house." That evening, I called my mother. I told her what Eleanor had said. My mother said, "She's confused, sweetheart." "The dementia," I said, "Mom." She was completely lucid when she said it. Silence. I said, "I need to check her accounts." My mother said, "We can't just—" I said, "Mom, I work in family law. I have seen this exact situation 17 times. Please let me check." Another silence. Then she said, "What do you need from me?" I said, "Eleanor named you secondary on her checking account 10 years ago. You still have access." My mother said, "Yes." I said, "Log in tonight." My mother called me back at 11:17 p.m. I know the exact time because I wrote it down. When you work in family law, you write everything down. You timestamp everything. You treat your own life the way you'd treat a case file, because sometimes that's exactly what it becomes. She said, "Olivia, just my name," the way my mother said my name when she had run out of the words that usually came before it. I said, "How bad?" She said, "In 8 months Derek has been there. 8 months Eleanor's checking account has gone from $47,000 to $3,200. I did the math without a calculator. Nearly $44,000. In 8 months. The transactions told a story. Not a subtle one. The first 2 months were small grocery runs, a home supply store, a pharmacy, normal caregiver spending, the kind that looks responsible, the kind that establishes a pattern of authorized purchases before the larger ones begin. Month 3, a $4,800 charge to a jewelry store in Derek's neighborhood, not Eleanor's neighborhood, Derek's. Month 4, $3,200 to an electronics retailer, the flat screen, possibly more we hadn't found yet. Month 5, 3 ATM withdrawals totaling $6,000, cash, untraceable. Month 6, a transfer of $8,500 to an account we didn't recognize. A single transaction, clean. Month 7, another transfer, $7,200. Same unknown account. Month 8, $5,100 to a car detailing and modification shop. Derek had bought himself a car upgrade with my grandmother's retirement savings. He had done it slowly enough that no single transaction triggered a fraud alert. He had done it while posting heart emojis on Facebook. While Eleanor called me by my mother's name and told me something didn't feel right in her house, I did not call Derek. I want to be clear about that. I did not call my cousin. I did not send a message to the family group chat. I did not call my Aunt Patricia, Derek's mother, who would have called Derek within the hour. I called my supervising attorney at the firm. Her name was Janet Bloom. She had been practicing elder law for 27 years. I texted her at 11:30 p.m. and said, "I need 10 minutes tomorrow morning before anyone else arrives. Family situation." She texted back, 7 a.m., "Bring the account statements." I printed the statements at midnight. I put them in a folder. I went to bed. I did not sleep. Janet looked at the statements for 4 minutes without speaking. Then she looked up and said, "Does Eleanor have a power of attorney document in place?" I said, "I don't know." She said, "Find out today. If Derek has gotten himself named as her POA even recently, even after the diagnosis, he may have a legal argument that these were authorized expenses." I said, "She has moderate dementia. Can she legally grant POA?" Janet said, "Depends on when. If it was granted before the diagnosis, or in an early stage window, yes. If it was granted after her capacity was significantly compromised, that's a different conversation." She tapped the statements. She said, "Either way, these transfers to the unknown account are a problem for him. That's not POA spending. That's diversion of funds." I said, "What do I do?" She said, "You contact Adult Protective Services today. You request a welfare check and a financial exploitation investigation. You do not tell Derek. You do not tell his mother. You tell your mother to change her banking password and do not log in again until APS has been notified. We need the account activity preserved exactly as it is." She handed the statements back to me. She said, "Olivia, you caught this." I said, "Eleanor caught it." I just listened. Adult Protective Services opened a case within 48 hours. They sent a caseworker to Eleanor's house on a Wednesday morning. Derek was home. He did not know they were coming. The caseworker conducted a welfare interview with Eleanor and a separate conversation with Derek. She documented the home condition, reviewed the visible living situation, and requested access to financial records. Derek refused to provide the financial records. That refusal, Janet told me later, was the single most damaging thing he could have done, because it confirmed what the account statements already suggested. APS referred the case to the County Detective Unit for financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Detective Harmon was assigned the following Monday. Detective Harmon came to my office on a Thursday. He sat across from Janet and me with the case file and a legal pad and the particular patience of someone who had done this many times and was not in a hurry, because hurrying made mistakes. He asked me to walk him through everything from the beginning. I did. He asked for copies of the statements. Janet had already prepared them. He asked about the power of attorney. Janet answered that she had researched it. Derek had gotten Eleanor to sign a POA document 7 months ago, 2 months after moving in. By that point, Eleanor's dementia had been diagnosed for nearly a year. Detective Harmon wrote something on his legal pad. He said, "The capacity question at the time of signing will be key." Janet said, "I have Eleanor's medical records from that period. Her neurologist documented significant cognitive decline in her assessment notes from 6 months before the POA was signed." Harmon wrote something else. He said, "That's helpful." He said it quietly, in the way that told you it was more than helpful. Derek was interviewed by Detective Harmon 10 days later. I was not there. I know what happened only from what Harmon told Janet afterward, and from the document trail that followed. Derek had arrived at the interview with his own attorney, a sign that someone had warned him, or that he was smarter than he'd appeared. He was cooperative on the surface, answered questions carefully. But the unknown account, the one that had received $15,700 in 2 transfers, was registered in the name of an LLC Derek had formed 4 months after moving into Eleanor's house. His own company. He had been transferring Eleanor's money to his own business account. When Harmon showed him the transfer records and the LLC registration and asked him to explain the connection, Derek's attorney asked for a 10-minute recess. They did not come back in 10 minutes. They came back in 40. And Derek's attorney made a proffer. Derek left Eleanor's house on a Saturday morning. He took his suitcases. He did not say goodbye to Eleanor. He did not call our family. He simply left. Eleanor called me that afternoon, a clear day, one of her good ones. She said, "Olivia, Derek is gone." I said, "I know, Grandma." She said, "He took some of my things." I said, "I know, we're working on getting them back." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I knew something wasn't right." I said, "I know you did. You told me." She said, "You listened." I said, "I always listen to you." She said, "Come on Sunday. I'll make lemon cake." She cannot make lemon cake anymore. Her hands shake too much and the steps confuse her on a bad day. But on Sunday, I drove to Sycamore Drive, and I sat in Eleanor's kitchen while she directed me flour here, zest there, the particular way her mother had always done it, and I made the cake while she talked. And we ate it together on the wraparound porch in the November cold with blankets over our knees. It was the best lemon cake I have ever tasted. Derek agreed to a civil settlement to avoid criminal prosecution. He repaid $38,400 of the $44,000, the amount that could be directly traced to specific transactions. The remainder was disputed, and Janet advised my family that recovering it would cost more in legal fees than it was worth. We accepted the settlement. The Hummel figurines were never found. The silver serving set was located at a consignment shop 40 minutes away. Janet's office sent a letter. The shop returned it without dispute. It is back in Eleanor's dining room cabinet now, where it has always belonged. Eleanor's care is now managed through a professional guardianship arrangement. Janet helped us establish a licensed guardian who manages her finances with full court oversight, monthly accountings, and zero ability for any family member to access her accounts without a judge's approval. It is the system that should have been in place before Derek arrived. It is the system we have now. My cousin Derek and I have not spoken since. His mother, my Aunt Patricia, called me once, 3 months after the settlement. She said she was sorry. She said she hadn't known. I believe her. I said, "I know, Aunt Patricia. It's okay." It is not entirely okay. But Eleanor is safe. The house on Sycamore Drive is still hers. The porch is still there. The garden, which a neighbor has been helping tend since spring, is coming back. And every 2 weeks, I drive to Sycamore Drive with lemon cookies from the bakery on 5th. I sit with Eleanor. I hold her hand. Sometimes she calls me Susan. I don't correct her. It doesn't matter. She knows I'm there. That's enough.